All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the community call where we're talking about all things grants. I'm joined here by Monet Supply and a few other awesome community members of MakerDAO. So feel free to kind of ask questions, start. This is going to be a lot more kind of conversation back and forth. I figure Monet Supply and I can kind of kickstart by answering a few questions that may kind of get everyone's minds started, as well as Planet X also had some great topics to discuss. So I'm going to actually start by asking Monet Supply to start by kind of giving us a little bit insight about like who you are and how you got involved with MakerDAO and grants particularly, because yeah, you're everywhere.
Yeah, I kind of got into crypto about a year ago, sort of landed at MakerDAO to begin with, because I think, we were doing governance before it was cool. We had real community-driven sort of initiatives and stuff. So landed at MakerDAO. I started just kind of doing random stuff, like worked on the vault compensation initiative for a sec, worked on some collateral applications. And then in the fall, I started working kind of like part-time for the risk team. And that was funded through MakerDAO grants, which I think was, it kind of like goes to show the value of a grants program, because just like, taking a job at somewhere is like a really big leap. But if you start just getting funded from source cred contribution type stuff, or from like a grants program that doesn't have such a big barrier to entry, it becomes a lot easier to like sign on. So that was a really good experience for me. And yeah, I've been working with the risk team and then just kind of doing ad hoc stuff for Maker since then, and transitioned to the DAO now, and also been doing various other stuff in other protocols, just kind of for fun on the side.
Yeah, maybe I can also give a little context to the Maker grants and how that's been structured and how we've approached it as the foundation. So we have sort of the development grants, which is sort of your traditional kind of what Ethereum Foundation might have as well, which is you're kind of working on a sort of kind of a work scope that has to do with the development of either the protocol or kind of an integrations type of project, and that gets scoped and then funded through specific milestones. So we had those under 50K, and that worked for us because we want to see things incrementally and then releasing the milestone, the payments through the milestones essentially. And then we kind of experimented with a lot of different other kinds of grants. We had one that were called like community development initiative proposals, which were like super micro grants under 5K. And that was for people in the community who wanted to propose something like translating a video. And those were much smaller. And that was, like I mentioned, under 5K. And that was really easy to kind of just see people contribute in a smaller way. And then in between that, we experimented with stuff like funding for the like risk analysis and collateral onboarding. And I would say collateral onboarding was one of our like top used grants in terms of being able to kind of give smaller grants that were around analysis of risk collateral, things like that, and kind of bring in more community members that way. So a lot of, I think, people actually that you see in the community now, very active in governance, actually were kind of funded through this risk and governance grant type aspect of it. But I guess just to kind of give a start, we'll dig into more details around like Maker and this opportunity. So with Maker Foundation, we just announced 2 weeks ago the official sunset of our program. And what's exciting for me is that this is like a huge opportunity where we know in the DAO and the protocol, creating a program that is based from the DAO and is funded directly by the protocol is a really big opportunity. We're seeing stuff like Uniswap and Compound now doing that directly as well. So I'm curious, Money Supply, I think you're involved in both, right? You're a reviewer on both Uniswap and Compound. Tell us a little bit more about your experience in that as both like a reviewer and as kind of also a holder and delegate of these two protocols.
Yeah, I think wearing as many hats as I do, uh, I don't think there's like a lot of issues with conflict, but I think it's the sort of thing that would, become important down the line, um, as it becomes like kind of less of like a small fam of like there's like not that many people who care about governance just overall, and it becomes more kind of widespread. Um, so that's something that I think will become more important is like just conflicts and like ethics. Um, as a reviewer, it's the way that both those grants programs are set up. They're directed by a lead who's compensated for their time, and they do all the due diligence basically, and then just kind of give you like a packet of grants that they think are approvable and like a good fair price. So as a reviewer, it's um, not too heavy of a load of work, which is uh, really great. But we still have the opportunity to ask more questions. We can ask to meet with the prospective grantees, for any ones that we want to do more diligence on, or maybe we're just interested. Um, so it's been a really good experience as a reviewer. I think that being said, like there's probably an expectation that whoever you want to be leading the committee, um, if you decide to set it up that way, like that's a job. So like you'll have to pay them. Um, Union comp grants also, at least so far, they work a little bit differently. Uniswap, they have a quarterly grants allocation thing, so everyone like applies by a deadline, um, and then we get back to you a couple weeks later, and then the payouts take a little while longer. Um, so it ends up being a little bit more of a drawn out process to receive a grant. Compound, it's I think kind of in response to the timeline for the unique grants, which started earlier. They have a rolling process, so I think we've actually already paid out our first batch of grants. Like, it's the idea is that you get from application to approval and payout within like 2-3 weeks. And I think that's really valuable in a certain way, because if you want, if we want to like capture a lot of like super big brain contributors who are just wanting to freelance, like, they might not be rich, they can't finance their contributions for months on end. They want to like have an idea, get to work on it, and then get paid for it, in a timely fashion. So I think speed of execution is important. um, I think Uni is kind of pivoting to that going forward. um, and then as a holder, I think both Comp and Uni have an interesting situation where they're allocating funds in dollar amounts, but then they're funding their grants programs in tokens, and then they're paying out people in tokens. So there's like some weird price risk, which has mostly been in kind of their favor recently. Like Uniswap, uh, they gave us $1.5 million originally, and now it's worth like 10 mil or something just ridiculous like that. um, so you know there's not a lot of clarity about what the conversions are. Like, if we already have the money as the Uniswap grants program, what's the process that we have to go through to ask for being able to use more of it? Um, it's not really clear. um, and then there's also no way for, like, as the uni grants program, we're way overfunded. We could run for like more than a year. um, like, how does the protocol take that money back? For now, it's basically just we're all homies, and we're just going to give it back if they want it. But um, that's not like a scalable way of running a program. So um, I think MakerDAO might have an easier situation, because you're paying out stuff in dollars. The money that we're going to give out is DAI, so it's same thing. So I think we might have a little bit of an advantage in simplicity there.
What are some of the like goal metrics of Uni and Compound? Like, is it just like give as much money as we've received away, or is there some sort of like a metric that people are success metric that they're following?
I think it's, it's pretty sort of like not that well defined of like what the success metrics are. There's an element where, when you have a treasury that's this huge, even donating, money to like public goods. I know that, Compound and Uniswap have both sponsored hackathons and Gitcoin and stuff, which is like sort of like just bringing attention to the grants and like, hey, if you're a builder, like we exist, come apply. But it's also kind of just like a donation. Um, when you have like this much resources, I think there's an element where it might be, a benefit even giving some of it away. Um, but the success metrics I think are still being figured out, and I think it ends up being more of like a grant by grant basis where like we have to like decide qualitatively, is like this a project that is good for the ecosystem, and then figure out what are the um, like what's success for that particular project that we decide is a good idea.
Yeah, I noticed with like Compound, the funding of like audits and integrations as like business development and hackathons, bounties, they're all kind of in like one grants aspect. And with the foundation, we kind of broke those things out a little bit more. So we did the development grants, which were which were specific to distribute, but also we had like service partners. So Quantstamp did audits for us, and that was sort of a separate thing where it was a part of the service for the grantees that if they want audits, they could kind of put work with Quantstamp, for example, and that really helped us because then they didn't have to go and find auditors, or they didn't have to go and figure things out. So and then we did some design research as well, and said, hey, if you need help with design research, we have someone on call that we can also use as a partner. It's been really awesome, and some grantees took that as well.
I think yeah, I think both of the grants programs are pursuing those sort of like foundational infrastructure type services that are going to let other people succeed building on top of Uniswap and Compound. Um, I think in the long run, it'll probably make more sense to, have different grants committees that are a little more focused on, one domain. So like, we'll have one committee that handles like the Uniswap bug bounty program and security audit grants, and then another committee that handles general like ecosystem, like, hey, integrate with Uniswap grants. I think for now it's just an element of like, hey, let's get something up and running and figure out what works, and find our process, figure out the legal structure, which is underexplored. I think I'm fairly certain both programs are KYCing the grantees, and there's a legal entity that's sort of the holding body of the funds. So yeah, I think it's kind of experimental in a certain sense right now, just like figuring out what works, but it'll make more sense to focus funding bodies a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we struggled with the most. So with our program, it was Rich that ran the program, and then now it was just me. And so we didn't have someone full-time working on it. And at the same time, we just opened it up to all sorts of like a wide range of risk governance to like what I call ecosystem, which is people who are building on top of DAI or developing something else. So it was really hard for like even if you have a small committee to review that range of things that are super technical. Some of them are so deep dive to things that are full stack on some area that you might not know about. And that was always very difficult to manage for us. So I also highly recommend that, like whoever you have a committee, have someone that's diverse in a group that can either start small or kind of have a diverse committee. I think at Consensus Grants, we used to have like 25, 30. So we knew we had people in specific areas that could cover it. And then that way we were able to take a full stack.
I think that was in the formation of the compound committee, that was an important point as well, of like having competency in various areas, and then also having like various stakeholder groups represented. I think like initially, like the roster of signers or reviewers was like a little heavy on like kind of investors and a little heavy on non-technical people, and then it kind of got rejiggered a little bit to even it out, because you need to have a broad, kind of representation to really make the right decisions.
I have a quick question. How much, so when you were setting the program, how much was it focused on the structure and running the program versus the decision makers and which, so people that should actually say, okay, this project or this person is worth of this money?
Ultimately, I think that both the comp and the uni programs, they have a structure, and they have like they have a mandate of like, okay, this is what you're, permitted to fund. This is how much money you're allowed to do. We're going to give you these many tokens to do it. And there's like a rough structure of, okay, like the reviewer will meet with everyone. They'll, do everything within these timelines. But I think the structure is very light for both those committees. Probably mostly just because we're not sure what's gonna work and what'll be scalable. So it does seem like ultimately at this point it's mainly based on trust and reputation and just kind of like it's kind of like almost like a credit risk decision of like, okay, what's our maximum loss if this thing does not work out well? It's $1 million, our treasury's 5 billion. Okay, like, I think that's a worthwhile test. But yeah, there's, ultimately there's a lot of discretion that's left up to the lead, and then reviewers are able to kind of put a break on it, and enough of us need to sign the transactions to send them out. But it's a lot of the discretion is given to the lead.
Okay, so you said that there's a lot of, I guess, emphasis on the framework, and the rules are set up front compared to this is some money and you should figure it out down the road.
Yeah, there's a general framework, but I think I don't know, I think we're figuring out like the gaps in the framework as we go along. Like Uniswap, we had like a snapshot vote a little while ago about increasing our budget for the second quarter because the amount of money that the tokens are worth has gone up a lot. But that wasn't really, that wasn't countenanced. Like nobody thought of that in the initial proposal, or like what makes a request to increase our budget valid. Do we need to do on-chain governance again? Technically we don't, because we already have the tokens, but yeah, I think ultimately it's more of like a test and learn approach to figuring out the procedures. I think that's okay though, in a certain sense. Like if you figure out what's the worst that could happen and it's not that bad, like maybe it's better to just have a bias for action versus making sure that everything's super safe before you even try.
That definitely makes sense. And it sounds like in that iteration, and I mean, logically in ours too, if we were to build one, the project lead would be like incredibly important, right? Like a lot of kind of is resting on them. So wondering if you had any insight into how they were chosen, or maybe how how they found them at Uniswap or Comp, and because obviously Juan and Amy and all those people are great, but they've got so many other things to do. They can't be sifting through every single grant.
Yeah, the Uniswap grants, it was sort of like driven forward by this guy Jesse, who's one of the like VC investors in Uniswap. But they got Ken, who I think used to like lead some grant stuff for the Ethereum Foundation. So having someone who has experience with grants programs in particular, I think is useful. Yeah, he is a grants OG. So yeah, I think that's a huge benefit. Other people kind of come up and learn over time, so like there will be more and more people who have that experience that we can draw on. But yeah, there's stuff that you don't expect. I also think that Ethereum sort of freelance people, they've come to expect a certain experience. So like you want to make sure that you're delivering on the process that they know and can work with. And then the compound grants program, it was this guy Larry who he used to work at Digital Currency Group and basically another kind of like finance VC guy. But I don't know if he has as much grants experience himself, but Ken as well has been kind of like advising and on the process, and he's a very thoughtful guy. I think if you're willing to like try hard and like really consider all of like the conflicts and like the governance issues and stuff, you don't need to have prior grants experience to make it work.
Yeah, I think when we were kind of looking for someone to kind of run like the management of the grants program, it was really interesting because you have the people who have grants experience in the traditional sense in terms of like academia, and it's a very like thorough, long, arduous process. And then you have people who have more like governance, like they're interested in governance and they want to do something that it's about like kind of public funding. Maybe they have nonprofit example or something like that. So it was really interesting to see like such a wide range of candidates, and then trying to understand like, I don't know, who would be great for a program like this is really hard to tell, because the other thing we also considered was like someone who was interested in being like a VC analyst, because you had to review so many submissions and like kind of do assessments in terms of, would they pass, would they not? And then at the other hand, we had someone like business development who knew that, like, who also had very similar skill sets. So you really could have anyone with like such diverse skill sets, but I think it depends on what you want for the grants program itself. Like with Maker, we're not trying to look at, or with the foundation grants, we weren't trying to fund projects that were super like well-funded and was already, going to be a superstar. That's not really what we were looking for. We were either looking for teams that could really build specific tooling for us, or teams that really needed the funding, like pulled together at that really critical early stage that then like help them get to the bigger stages. So we had like Sablier pulled together. And so that's sort of the relationship we want to build. So it could be that the DAO decides that's not really what we're interested in. We really want to do audits and things that are useful. That could also be the chance. But I think that helps to determine what kind of person you might want for the lead as well.
Do you guys envision like a systematic approach to conflicts of interest, or is it just a case by case thing? So like, for example, Money Supply, you said you had experience with Uni and Comp, which like, I mean, if we were to add Sushi Swap, that would definitely like, you might have opinions on that. Or Comp, for example, has been focusing on USDC over DAI, which much to my chagrin. Like, how do we feel about conflicts of interest, or do we just take it on a case by case?
I think, yeah, I think the processes need to like scale with kind of like a bigger social circle, where, for the time being, like most people, I feel like myself included, have a lot more to lose from, misplaying ourselves and like, you know, misplaying a conflict versus trying to like get some sort of gain out of it. But that probably won't be the case, you know, over time as like the stakes get higher and maybe you can get like bigger payoffs for doing shady stuff. And there's just more people that you know less of. So yeah, for now, there's not really a super strong procedure. I think everyone you're expected to self-disclose. If you don't disclose correctly, or if you do some shady stuff, your reputation gets blown up. I personally have, extra experience of the conflict stuff because my day job, Tally, we focus on like a front end interface, but we also like, we have ideas about contracts and other stuff that we want to build that is never going to make us any money, but is like cool and hopefully useful. So we've applied for Compound and Uniswap grants, which I'm also sitting on the committee and I work there and I have like, it's a startup. So my take is basically I just don't discuss any of the stuff that I'm affiliated with and I don't like vote on it. And I think, I hope everyone knows that like, I think everyone probably has the idea that if they don't think the grant is worthwhile, like reject it. And like, I'm not gonna like feel shady about it, but it's.
Yeah. I don't mean to like pick on you, but just
No.
it's going to be a general issue, right?
No, I wanted to call that out just because I think that's a really a poignant example of like, that's absolutely a conflict, potentially. In our particular case, like we're getting, a medium amount of money to build some contracts that are never going to earn us a dime, and they're going to be open source. So I think it's, it works out well, but like, yeah, that's an example of like the type of conflicts that you need people to call out. I think it gets really dicey, and you wonder if there's a way to like try and deal with this without relying on people's reputation, because I think that's the core of it now.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just something the whole space has to learn to grapple with, and especially when we've got so many anons, right? Reputation is one thing, but if your reputation is disposable because it's just a cartoon character, like we need to think about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think anons can still have reputation, but it's more, amorphous. Like, yeah, it's definitely
Earned,
different.
not given. Yeah.
Maybe
Money supply. For Compound and Uni, these programs, did they have any structure? Like Uni or Compound had priorities, and the grants were supposed to fix a certain areas of whatever. For take Maker, we're bottlenecked in oracles and we're bottlenecked in smart contracts. So theoretically, it would be possible to focus the grants program, at least to some degree, through a tiered structure. Is that possible?
I think it's definitely possible. The Uniswap grants committee, I think, there was a mandate of like, these are our priorities of funding, but it was like very high level. It's not like, okay, we want to fund somebody to look at the pros cons of turning on the fee switch or something like that, that's a big undertaking of itself and like something that they should fund. And maybe I need to like get off my butt and kickstart it, but yeah, it wasn't specific like that. It was just like, okay, like we want to fund people that are integrating with Uniswap or building infrastructure that'll be useful to Uniswap. It was very general. I think you could specify it more if you had particular needs. I think Compound maybe did like a little bit more focused of a job where they specifically like said, okay, we're not trying to fund just ecosystem infrastructure. We want to find stuff that is going to like provide some sort of direct benefit to Compound as like our highest priority. I'll fish out the links to the initial proposals for each. They kind of like scoped out what the mandate was. They're both very general though, I think is the TLDR on both those.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
I think the other end of that too is sort of the problem you have with bounties. So you can kind of use bounties as like, hey, we're looking for something. We called it help wanted in the Maker chat. But the trouble with that was if you're too specific, and then nobody like finds that that's like that they want to build that specific solution or something. And if you're not specific enough, that you get people who kind of build like sub solutions. I think in terms of something that Maker did, Pramosh put one that was like wanted for some risk tooling, and he kind of overlaid like 3 problem areas that he's like wanted to tackle, and gave out 2 different grants, 2 different teams that kind of covered these different areas. So I think that when you do get into a space of like trying to describe something, Ethereum Foundation, they did some high level ones as well, and some of it worked out, some of them just like never got touched. So it sort of depends on how you like define it when it comes to the details.
And turning the channel here to another, I guess another street or avenue, what is Compound's and Uniswap's take on how they're going to use the grants for marketing? I think, if you look at the whole scope, Maker has kind of led the way in that, with all the things they've done in South America and in Africa. So I was just wondering to see if you guys at Compound and Uniswap had talked about as far as marketing Compound. I mean, I personally haven't seen any of that, but maybe they don't have to. Is that something you guys are going to use grants for?
So the sort of marketing expenses to date have basically been, it's like sort of quasi marketing / donations to like either hackathons or grants programs, like Gitcoin type stuff. But basically it's marketing for the grants program itself, trying to raise visibility, specifically among freelancers, people who might be looking to kind of like pick up bounties and grant freelance work. So like targeting them where they're at. So like, random hackathon people, like if you're smart and you are coding stuff to like have a chance to win like a grant at a hackathon, maybe you want to have like a much better, like, grant approved that's like more, valuing your time, better. I don't know. So yeah, I think it's more of marketing for the grants programs itself. Personally, like for myself, participating in either the comp or uni grants programs, I wouldn't want them to focus on protocol marketing at this point. I think that should be its own thing with people who know about marketing, because like, yeah, we really don't, like, I don't know jack about marketing. So
Yeah, got it. No, I was just wondering because you usually get like some quote unquote influencer from YouTube who wants to promote, not that Uniswap or Compound or Maker need to. But
I was going to say there have been some applications kind of along those lines, and they basically just go to the circular file directly. So yeah.
Got it. And speaking of getting more developers into O3 protocols and beyond, have any of an O3 Maker, this can go to you, Amy, or Juan, have any of you thought of maybe setting up grants for like technology-based schools? And I don't mean like Stanford, the top ones, but maybe even high schools where you can attract young talent to maybe develop on Maker or Uniswap, in the next 5 years. Is anyone working on that?
I can take this one if you want, Amy. But basically, Frank, it is a good idea. I think that it's worth exploring. But at the moment, I think that there are so many grants program or parts of the program that should take priority over that, right? Potentially when you start developing something from kind of scratch, such as high school, it's a long way until we see the return on investment, compared to, as Monet Supply was saying, just funding something that's more specific, like a bounty, something for technology, for risk, so something that will cover a specific need. So I think it's more important right now to set up a program to start spinning this off, and if we see that we're running out of people that want to help directly, we can then start attacking the technology platforms.
I could share just more of experience. So
Mhm.
we had a few groups that asked like for some funding, but I would say with like in high school kind of level. So with some of those high school ones, there were some technical schools, for example, and they're really eager, but it was pretty general because, like Juan said, they didn't really have experience like building on top of protocols. They just kind of needed maybe like they're doing a hackathon, or a lot of these were doing hackathons. So we've also had experience funding a lot of hackathons, but it's really hard to get enough value out of the hackathons if you aren't designing the experience from after, like what happens in the hackathon to what happens afterwards. So we funded hackathons, they created things, but do you follow up funding on that? Do you bring them in? And a lot of it, we didn't see the conversion of them actually like continuing to build on top of something. Like we funded a privacy one. But going back to it, yeah, so their requests were pretty general, like we'd love, just some sponsorship for this hackathon we're having or this event we're having. I asked them how they found that out of us, and it was a lot of work that the marketing team and business development team did in terms of, going out and getting everyone aware about DAI, not just people who are in crypto. So that was really, really helpful for us as well.
Okay. So if it's not high school students, could we try the other end of the spectrum? Let's say already properly established software companies, and try to bring them into crypto. Is that like
one intermediary where we might want to focus is there's like a lot of like student groups from like universities that are sort of like crypto interested, and some of those kids are like, they know how to code, they're pretty freaking smart, and they have like all this time on their hands and like low salary expectations in a certain sense. So I think that could be pretty fruitful. A lot, like, especially once Maker gets delegation, I think that might be really nice because like Compound and Uniswap, a lot of like Cal Blockchain and Stanford and a couple other places, they've like, random whales have like just hooked them up with 1 million votes, or, some large but not like risky amount of votes. And yeah, it's like a really easy way to like engage smart people who have a lot of time on their hands to solve your problems. Somebody from Cal who I spoke with is like interested. They're just on their own, like trying to make up like a risk analysis engine for MakerDAO, kind of like Gauntlet's whole like sort of like risk engine. And like we haven't offered him jack as far as I'm aware. So like that's pretty cool, I think.
all right? So there's kind of a middle ground here. That is probably the most fruitful area. Is that how I should interpret this?
I'm thinking also being open to professionals and kind of firms is a good idea as well. But just the student groups, like they just have like so much to give that we can get maybe more out of that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
One caveat to that is with clubs, like blockchain clubs, they're very anti like taking different, like they care a lot about conflicts of interest, so they don't all necessarily like take even grants or funding or sponsorships. So it's really interesting to see that aspect of it.
Which is maybe even better, because like they won't even take our money. They're like, no, we're gonna do this for free whether you like it or not.
I was going to ask Amy, if you like, are there rough numbers in terms of how much like grant money the foundation has given out? I mean, I know obviously it's like spread across different programs, but that might be interesting for us to have in terms of thinking like next steps, like core unit working group, like what makes sense.
Yeah, I just put in the chat funding.makerdao.com. We gave a grant to build transparency dashboard, where it kind of gave the list of projects and so on. We didn't give as much as I would say most programs, because we were really bottlenecked at reviewing process. So compared to, we did this across since fall of 2018 or so, and then really didn't do any this year. So it's not too long. And then we gave him blocks of 50K, and some of them we gave a max of 50K, and a lot of them were actually just smaller, because they were coming from such a diverse group of countries that aren't asking for 50K. They're asking for maybe like 10, some of them are 7K, and it means a lot to them. Like the stories are just like incredible. They want to with 7K, like I could finally work on this full time. I was like, what? That's all it takes. So there's certain groups, I think the money goes a really long way for certain groups of people. So thinking about geographical diversity, I would say, is also super important.
That's super true. I know from the Uniswap committee, they were able to fund basically like 24/7 customer support in the Uniswap Discord for like not very much money, I will say. And it's, they have like international people in like a couple different countries kind of like spread geographically so that they cover all the hours, but like, it's economical for everyone involved, which is like pretty cool. Like the fact that you can get to like a global workforce of like really capable people.
I want to maybe switch the conversation to more Maker specific. I know a few people had really great ideas of what could work for Maker specifically as a grants program. Curious if anyone wanted to expand on their thoughts of like, what is the opportunity here for Maker? Not sure if anyone here really also wants to run a grants program. Maybe there is. So I'd love to hear from anyone.
Yeah, I just think like a core unit makes so much sense. Like you really do need a self-contained unit to kind of take care of doing this. My only worry is that it'll take a little bit to get a core unit up and going, and I don't know what the response should be in the interim. Because I mean, we've got DAI, we've got great projects around us, so I don't think there's any reason to push it down the line,
Yeah, and sorry, Juan, real quick, and I guess from last week, what hit me the most was money supply. I don't know if you saw the replay of last week's GNR call where Nadia of the BD team made a presentation, and she kind of asked the community, like, what is the most important thing that we should focus on? And is it Maker or DAI, right? And I kind of realized, a lot of times in my life, I've been thinking Maker. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about DAI. So I guess I agree with Peyton, like, a core unit and that's strictly focused on DAI. Maker is Maker and it's going to be Maker. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say, I think. Juan, sorry.
No, I wanted to comment a bit on the plans. So we haven't posted yet. The deadline is tomorrow, but we are working with a group of people that I'm really happy to be working with on scaling the system. And one of these programs has to do a lot with setting up. I don't know what to call it, grants yet, but we have like an arm of sponsorship where we deal with these programs. So we will be trying to focus on that at least for the time being. And as Pros was commenting, yes, it might take a while for a real core unit or a specific core unit, but the idea is to start bootstrapping that to make sure that we get programs running and we are serving MakerDAO, and then with that we can help. And yeah, if it makes sense, and it seems by this conversation and by what Money Supply was saying, that it might make sense to have its own core unit dedicated to running this, right? So yes, we're looking forward to showing this probably tomorrow and getting your feedback on this.
Then I don't know if Monet Supply or really anyone might have like thoughts in terms of like, should the directionality of grants be separated? Like, is that something we should be looking at? Like, for instance, like social causes versus like a maker tool that we need. Like, do those inherently need to be separate systems tracking those, or is one giant grants group good enough?
I think there's maybe an argument that, like, if some specific existing core unit has something they need, like they should be trying to like budget that into their contingencies. So like, okay, if we want to write a grant for like somebody to like build some risk model or something that the risk team needs, ideally, like in the long run, that should be coming out of risk budget. I think for like proper kind of allocation and just like figuring out like, you know, where is the money really going. It could be possible in the meantime, like, oh, somebody blew their contingency, like, you know, we can figure out a way to like get them more money, or like maybe there's like some just kind of like fallback like grants team that will just front it, and then it'll just be kind of like accounted for under their budget later. But yeah, I think it would be cool to like try and keep everything that's specific to a core unit with that core unit.
So what I also go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Specific to the core unit, I very much agree on that. But if we need a whole new core unit, that is not going to come from the existing core unit. So in that case, that would be a part of another budget.
So the our plan Planet X was to kind of like have a little bit of this hybrid model. I don't know if I should share the screen or if showing a diagram is an overkill, but people usually like diagrams. So this is a bit what we were trying to do, right? So what we want to do is do the support and everything that has to do with this kind of like funnel and process, and be able to support that. And any existing core unit, as Money Supply was saying, could say like, hey, we would like to have this bounty for this, or we would like to find talent. How do we do it? And help them with all that. And they would be kind of like the judges and potentially the ones paying for it. And the other one is, if we see that there's a DAO need that is not being covered by any existing core unit, maybe start with our own program and then take it from there. But I don't want to kind of like hijack the call and start with the political party. So I'll maybe stop now.
I think there's like two parts to the grants, which is one, the content and direction. So like what kind of grants you're trying to give. And then the second piece is operations. So running, I think, like the grants program, as kind of Money Supply was also describing, there's a review process, there's a gathering of it and going out and doing the payments. And part of that is, I think, if there's a program that's small and it's easy to do, then it could live under a core unit. But in some cases, like I was talking to Promotion, he's like, I want to do grants, but I don't want to deal with the operations of it. Can we just get another grant, another core unit to do that, and that could also be possible. So they can draft like what they want to see, and then the other experience of like not necessarily the application review, because that's, I think, something unique to the core unit, because it'd be hard for someone to just know. But then, after that, okay, don't worry, you go through this step next. There is like on the other side an experience that a grantee wants to have, which they might be familiar with, or they might not be familiar with. Communication back and forth. There's all these like hidden things that I think you don't get to see in the process.
Yeah, I think that could be great if there was a framework for like, hey, I need a thing, and I don't have time to interview and go over all this, because I brought that up to Long because I was like, I don't know in the meantime if governance should be looking at governance grants, and it's like, be nice if we could, but we're busy, so the best way to streamline it, I think, seems reasonable.
Well, we have just 4 minutes left, so I want to give the floor to anyone who didn't get a chance to ask questions or speak to bring up something. No takers? Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Vanessa. You're obviously a very, very busy person, so appreciate that you're coming out, sharing your experience and all these. I think it was super insightful to see different teams and different protocols and how they're handling it. I appreciate you taking all these questions just very gracefully. And then thank you to everyone who came. I hope we get to continue this discussion on the forum as well, because I think we agree this is something that Maker is definitely could use and use the opportunity for. All right. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.